All right, before I hear the banter about bringing you on Valentine's Day on this, main item on our agenda has called in sick, the benefits coordinator. But Zach has come in and he's going to give us an abridged,
Operative word,
yeah.
abridged.
Version of what we were going to have Kelly come in and talk about. And I think we might have Kelly in on the next meeting to expand upon this if it's something that we want to pursue in the future.
She did a very nice job last night in the selection.
Yeah.
Very nice job.
Yeah.
Very nice job.
So, like I said, I wanted to have the benefits come in because there were certain things that were brought up. I know that I have brought up an issue a couple times that I wanted to just to see if it was a viable option about the outsourcing, not the outsourcing, excuse me, the replacement of insurance if a spouse is on their works insurance, if maybe we can get them off the Milford town and see if there could be the possibility of some savings there, and if we could maybe incentivize it and maybe, do the math and see if it works for us. Obviously, very preliminary talk because, with the math and everything, it's, it may not work, but I at least wanted to at least look at it as well as a couple other things, so.
Chairman, you look like you by yourself to tonight's school.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, no one else showed up. I have no Valentine. So we got Tom and Zach here.
Thanks for the flowers, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. You deserved them.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I would appreciate if you'd have reschedule Kelly to come in. If anything, just it's been a couple of years since we created the benefits department, and she's been doing great work. And just I'd like to see her give an update on some other stuff. But I'm going to cover a couple topics that she talked about on Monday. We talked about this also at the last meeting, and just wanted to go in a little more detail, as well as there is an additional topic here that the selectmen voted on Monday night to approve as well. So I'm going to start with a couple of the items that we talked about last time. I'll get to the opt-out policy. I'll do that last. The first is the health insurance mitigation account. That was the town meeting article that took place in 2012. If you recall, we discussed this at the last meeting. It basically was originated from the town being required to do some health insurance reform and to adopt a health insurance plan that was more premium based, and Kelly would have explained this a lot better, but at the time it had to be mimicked on the GIC. So it was less than desirable to the employees, or just a little worse than what it was before, but it helped out the town significantly in cost reduction at the premium level. So this was all followed by MGL 32B, section 21 through 23, which also required that some of the savings that the town would incur would have to be split between the town and the employee, basically based on the same percentage as what the split is between the cost of the town and the employee, 70-30. So part of that piece of the give back, if you will, to the employee was this town meeting article, which was the mitigation plan, which basically took high claim out-of-pocket users, gave the ability to reimburse them up to $500 if they met certain criteria. It's been here for going on 6 years. Original appropriation was $100,000, and we're at a point now where I think we're going to see that be completely depleted by the annual town meeting. So we went in front of the selectmen on Monday, seeking approval to have it replenished back to $100,000, or simply just apply another $100,000 at the annual town meeting. They voted unanimously in favor to do so. It's a good program, and it helps out with some of those families that are in need and that have these high costs. And God forbid you don't want to use it, but it does help out, and we're hoping to continue that and have town meeting support as well as this body support. Again, the selectmen did vote for it on Monday night. Any questions on that? You want me to jump right into the next one? Right. So this one we did not talk about at the last meeting. A little bit smaller, but it is again a nice benefit. So this is we're looking to enhance the flexible spending account, and what we want to do there is right now the program we have has a maintenance fee of approximately $59–$60 a year, broken out monthly. It's like $5 a month. The maintenance piece, basically just a fee that gets charged, no pay whatsoever by the town, so it's all on the individual, the employee, to participate in the program. The program is one of those health insurance accounts where you have pre-tax money. It's an awesome program. And when it first started in 2013, it was only offered to school employees. I think it was a result of a teacher's contract negotiation. And then from there, it branched out to any union, town hall, and anyone that's a town of Milford employee. So I think we have approximately 80 people in the plan right now, and Kelly would tell you one of the deterrents of why you would think could be a lot more popular, and she believes one of the deterrents is this maintenance fee of $5. Almost reminds me of Cherry Sheet. Here's 20 million, but we're taking 3 million back, you know, so it's kind of like you could save a couple $100, but you got to pay for it. So the way the program works is there's the potential for a use it or lose it. If you don't spend all of the amount that you signed up for, it stays in the fund, and that has absolutely happened. So we have built up around $10,000 of like defaulted money, if you will. So our proposal was that we wanted to take that defaulted money and pay for the maintenance cost, basically offering it free of charge. It technically speaking could work both ways. You could have an employee sign up for the program. Once you do, the full amount you take is available to you immediately. So you could have a situation where somebody quit, retired, resigned, whatever, and they had already paid all of their reimbursements or had received all their reimbursements, yet have not paid into the fund. So as that has happened, it hasn't been anything significant or any crazy full amount like I just described. So we're pretty comfortable thinking that this probably would be self-sufficient at least for a few years. So the selectmen did vote in favor to support that, under the condition that we come back and kind of periodically and update them to tell them if there is a foresight that it potentially could cost the town. And if it did, say it was 100% that we did have to pay for, it'd be approximately $5,000 per year. But again, I don't really see that happening. We have been making money off of it. It's kind of shocking to me, but it continuously seems to be the situation. And at the same time, it allows me to kind of clean up the books a little bit because it's created this debit balance in my liability withholding fund. So I think it's kind of a win-win right now.
Now, Zach, let me ask you a question, and obviously it's completely unrelated to the reimbursement of the excess toward this. Why aren't more people involved with this? I know that, like, my wife has it, and we max out our dependent care.
Yeah.
You know, at $5,000, it's $2,500 for medical expenses. I mean, it's free money. Why is it not? And it doesn't cost the town anything because, as you mentioned,
Correct.
the fee is employee based.
Correct.
Why are we not offering this to everyone?
It is offered to everyone, so I think it may be a combination of it.
Oh, I thought you said it was just the teachers. That's why I apologize.
Originally it was.
Okay.
It now is offered to everyone. So at the time when it started, there was like 8 teachers that signed up for it.
Yeah.
And then we did launch it to any town of Milford employee, and it's slowly been more popular, and we're up to about 80 now. But
It just seems on an education-based thing. If you let our employees know, I mean,
may be a factor. in
I
my
really think
opinion.
that that's the hindrance because let me tell you, it doesn't cost the town of Milford anything, and it is a huge benefit. I know that my family, just on dependent care and everything, when you talk about $5,000 just for dependent care, you save about $1,400. So when you talk about $59 versus $1,400 in savings, and then if you use the medical plan to the max, which I believe is $2,500. You know, you're talking about this $60 is nothing.
Exactly.
Now, obviously, if you have 500 people sign up tomorrow, then your fund is not going to be able to pay the reimbursement on
More
those,
than
and I
likely,
understand that.
yeah.
But to me, and I think an education to our employees
Yeah.
on what significant savings that they could get from this program, I think would be a good thing. And I don't. That's something I would tell Kelly, and
Yeah.
if you could pass that along to me, that's the education on that. I think would be a huge benefit.
Who is the bank you're dealing with these accounts? Let me tell you from my personal experience, I have this account, and the bank doesn't
I don't pay
charge.
any fees on mine.
Doesn't
either.
charge, because they love having all that money in the account. I don't know who's charging $60,
HR Concepts, I believe is what it is.
that's really high in the marketplace.
But also probably the enrollment too, when you only have 80 people, you know, there are fees involved.
Well, you said that we thought for sure that once we hit that number that we'd be able to negotiate it.
Well,
They were set in
People don't
stone.
understand it.
Very
Nobody-
much to your point, Jerry, yeah.
Nobody, I work in this business all the time, and I bring up HSA, and people look at me like,
Yeah.
you know, because their deductible plans that they got, their deductible is $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, and I said, oh, by the way, have you ever thought to use your employer's your health savings account? They go, what is that?
Yeah. Eyeglasses,
One
prescriptions.
of the fears is that when the money drops off.
Yeah,
Okay, there are some plans that the money does not drop off. It's, the one I have with General Motors, when I left General Motors, I still have that money in that account. I was allowed to take that and carry that over.
So use it or lose it.
I think now, I think,
Not all
I think
of them.
now it's a use it or
HSAs
lose it.
roll over, FSAs.
FSAs don't.
Use it, use it.
But
FSAs, you
FSA is
can
correct.
roll it over,
Chris
because
is
mine
right.
rolls over.
the tax
Yours
tax
rolls over.
advantage savings
Rolls
are
over.
unbelievable in this, because otherwise you pay that doctor bill with after-tax money, or you
Real
pay it
dollars.
with before-tax money,
Yep.
and depending on, I mean, you're talking about federal and state, you're avoiding federal and state taxes at that. And I agree with you, it's a huge tax advantage. It's still good in 2018 so far. It could get changed
Yeah.
before the end of the year, but
Yeah.
it's a hell of a program. But I'm just I think the $60 maintenance fee is high.
yeah.
And I think someone needs to go back to
I
the,
think that, to your question, I think that's,
It's
in
because it's
Kelly's
only-
opinion anyway, and I think I share it, that has been a deterrent.
No question. Paul?
Yeah, and just one other deterrent is the $10,000 balance that you're talking about. Obviously, that's money that people put in that they didn't use. So a big deterrent to FSA accounts is you either have to use it or lose it. If you don't have regular planned expenses, like for example daycare or some of those other things, who's to say what you're gonna end up in the hospital with this time? So
There's no question. It's a planning thing. No, I'm not arguing
Fear
that. but-
factor of being the
Yep.
people that left the 10,000 on the table.
Yeah.
Now,
Zach,
you
you
said the
said the
town keeps that money?
Yeah,
So then do we have the option to not have a use it or lose it plan? Because I feel like that would, more than the
I don't-
$60, I
I-
think that would be,
I think
That's
it's a
government.
federal,
IRS
yeah, I don't
sets
think
that.
we do have an option.
you don't have an option.
No,
You
yeah.
have to use it or lose it.
I'll
You'd
look
be-
into
you'd
that,
be
but I'm
surprised how
pretty
much the IRS
positive
has
that
to
we
say
do
about
not
this
have an,
stuff.
yeah, it's IRS
IRS
regulated.
regulates,
Yeah, that's
IRS
why.
regulates CMS.
I just
I
think it
also
should
do
be
think you're
informed.
alluding to this too, and I think it's true, but I think people could be educated. I think we could have a little bit of a marketing campaign. I think
Yeah.
we could use the website, but I bet you there's a population that work here that just don't know we offer it,
Yeah.
so,
There's no question.
yeah,
To me, it's a great asset to our employees that
it is.
we should
It
be
is. I
waving the
use it.
flag and
I
saying,
do the
yeah.
dependent here, you know,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
And to Zach's point, you know, I had it when my kids got braces.
Yeah.
January 1 kid, 2,500 went to the other January 1, so
Yep.
good to see that.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, to save that kind of money on that, that's great. Yeah.
Yep. All right, so that's FSA.
Did we decide that the town was gonna bear the liability?
The selectmen voted, I was hoping to get the support of the FinCom as well.
Do we need a motion tonight?
If we want to do that, and I think it's I apologize, I skipped over that,
I
but
think it's a good idea, but I also think we ought to do a little due diligence if we can, find out if we, take it to Bank of America, take it to TD Bank, take it to another carrier, take it to another administrator. It's an administrative fee, it's just like Fidelity and anybody else,
Yeah.
charging you for
Knowing
beyond what
Kelly,
they-
she probably did, but I don't want to speak on her behalf, so,
but it's the enrollment numbers. That's why if we can get those numbers up, I'm sure you can go to someone.
exactly.
If you can get double those to 160 or 200, I'm sure the bank's gonna love having 200 people
Yep.
put X number of dollars in their accounts.
But in the meantime, for the people who have been paying the fees, to me, I think that's a great avenue. That hey, some of them lost it. Let's wash that out for them. So, Mr. Schiavi, you asked if there needs to be a motion. Will you be willing to make that motion?
Sure, I'll make the motion that we endorse the plan to go forward with the flexible spending account and have the what is, what the government?
Have the excess fees pay for the.
Excess fees paid for.
Pay
It's
for the
our
maintenance.
position to approve it, because we're the finance committee.
Yep.
That has to go through approval of this finance committee.
So, there's
Sure.
a motion by Mr. Schiavi. Do I have a second on that?
Come on, who's coming on
I'll
board?
second it.
All right.
Second by Jerry. All those in favor for having the excess funds pay for maintenance fees for the current members using the FSA&H? All right.
Okay,
Thank you.
so the employees of Milford can thank us for that one.
Last one, I don't have a ton of new news to report on this. We've been looking into this opt-out policy. Chairman spoke most of what I would say. We went in front of the selectmen. We were in no position whatsoever to actually ask for anything. We're not in a position to propose anything right now. We're just kind of in like an investigation stage. Kelly has been reaching out to not only the private sector, but other towns. A lot of them don't, but some of them do. So right now we're somewhat looking for guidance, if you will, on like how aggressive we want to go. It seems to be a large variety of different parameters, from anywhere from the requirement to having to be in the plan for at least 12 months before you opt out and then be eligible for a payment, or is it that you just are not in the plan? I mean, you have people that potentially have been here for 20, 30 years and just never took advantage of the health insurance because their spouse either works here or has another better plan. So we're still, and we're worried that that could go from a large cost to potentially a big savings, which I think the latter would be what we would desire to do. So we're still kind of in investigation stage right now. We're gonna do some more homework. Our plan is to try to contact a couple more communities that do participate and to actually sit down with whoever's running it and kind of feel out what their experience has been. And then from there, possibly tweak something better to bring forward. So I don't anticipate that this will happen for this fiscal year, or ideally it should happen during the health insurance plan year. So we got some time, and Kelly's gonna be looking into it. I'm gonna help her along the way, and we'll be back in front of this board to discuss our findings in more detail before
Chris?
putting a proposal together.
Just one thought to keep in the back of your mind. There's no longer a healthcare mandate. So this could impact the decision-making process and how people select healthcare. They no longer have to, that's all gone.
Yeah.
And that's,
I don't know if it's all gone. Is it all gone?
The
Oh, yeah.
penalty's gone.
no, there's no mandate on the.
I thought there was still a.
No, it's not, but
Well,
there is a requirement of
state
healthcare,
one.
the state requirement.
There's a state
The Romney plan's still in place
Yeah.
for the state.
Point well taken. I mean, there's
Because-
big changes going on. at the
Because
same
you
time.
start offering people an option to opt out of healthcare when they hear that the mandate is no longer required on the federal, all of a sudden you're gonna get huge swings and unintended consequences. I'm a little bit,
No, Jerry, that's it. You just took the words out of my mouth. That this is an extremely complicated situation that has far-reaching financial impact.
this could get more complicated than the water company.
No, good. And that's why I'm not in
I'm not in-
any rush to do anything. I just wanted to start the wheels rolling. And when it all comes down to, if it costs us $1 more, then
Fine.
it would save us. Then we're not interested in it. I just wanted to get the wheels rolling on it and
Yeah,
just take a
we
look
should
at it.
look at it.
And because I do agree that it's unbelievably complex.
Yeah.
And we'll never totally understand healthcare, the way the premiums go up and then they go down and you have no idea why.
Yeah,
There's no
yeah.
rhyme or reason to it. So that's why it needs to be a really well vetted
We also
decision.
think, that it's a possibility that the unions would need to get involved, the insurance advisory committee. We're worried about discrimination per the
Yep.
parameters and all that other stuff. So we're looking at it, and we'll be back to talk about it.
Chris, I have a question. I don't know if this is a question for Kelly, Zach, but what are we doing in terms of putting healthcare out to bid and determining levels of coverage and that sort of thing? Because, I mean, the premiums that we're paying for the town, I could tell you, are significantly more than my law firm pays. And we're on Blue Cross. My sister works for the largest employer in Milford. We're paying significantly more than the premiums for that shop. So I'd like to just get some sort of sense of.
Kelly would be able to explain a lot better than I would, but we do have an insurance advisory committee, which is made up of one member of every union, and they do all the vetting, and they are pretty serious. They're impressive. They do their homework. Obviously, they're trying to benefit the employees the most, and at the same time, what they can't solely make the decision, they still have to take it forward to the Board of Selectmen to bless it. But periodically, they look at the GIC. If Kelly was here, she'd probably go on a rampage over it, where they're not doing that great right now. It's really, she's super thrilled we didn't jump on that ship.
I'm sorry, GIC for the newly initiated?
Right here, government, GIC, Massachusetts. I had it up here, man, I'm
What's
sorry.
what's the acronym is all?
It's the government,
Group
government.
insurance?
Insurance.
Okay.
Insurance Commission,
Okay.
yeah.
Government
It's the
insurance
state, it's
commission.
the,
It's a state health insurance.
Got
state
it.
health,
Got it.
450,000 employees.
That's the thing, it's meant to be bigger pool, hopefully better savings,
Doesn't seem to
better
be great
usage.
savings for
Oh,
that
yeah.
size.
How did that work?
It's a good plan, don't let anybody.
Didn't work at all.
It didn't, I know the
abomination.
state's dealing with some issues because
It's an
of it.
abomination, and the
Aldo, how do you feel?
Can we quote you on that one, Aldo?
quote me on it, because we're not part of it. But the fact of the matter is, I met today with the insurance advisor from my former employer, and we are actually looking for ways to get the premiums down, and we're still with the blues. The day of being able to go out and secure your own bids is probably gone, because right now, they're coming through different collaborative groups, and that's how you buy the insurance. But there are lots of things you can do to mitigate the increase in the premiums, but it's not an easy thing. We're public sector, remember, you're private sector. You can do pretty much what you want. We're challenged by 32B.
Correct.
And so, basically,
And union
it's like
contracts.
this, your hands are tied, and that's what you go. You have to walk the walk.
What's your risk ratios?
Andy, 10 years ago, we were self-insured, and as it was successful in Milford, I am super glad we got out of it. You see a lot of these towns, like a Springfield, a Holyoke, that are in really dire straits and in need of the state coming in to bail them out. They have a common denominator of being
Self-insured, but the fact of the matter is, if you draw your self-insurance program properly with the different stopgap losses, you can, in
Yeah.
fact, make out. But there's always a tail.
Yeah.
The tail is 2 years out. And by the time, you know how the medical people work, that 2 years out, suddenly you get $10,000 worth of bills sitting on your desk because there were pharmaceuticals back then, or you get 20, you're never done.
If you
You're
recall,
never done.
If you recall, like 3 or 4 years ago now, we had done the premium holiday, and it was to distribute out the remaining funds
Right.
that we had when we were self-insured. And I just said 10 years ago is when we were self-insured, and only 4 years ago we put it out. And that's because for 6 straight years, we continuously got bills to pay.
Yeah.
And then we felt finally they were done. To
Right.
get that off the books, we had to issue a
It
holiday.
it took us about 5 years
Yeah.
to catch up with all the loose money that was still out there.
It's almost like snow and ice. If you incur a deficit, it absolutely has to be mandated to be raised on your tax recap. So imagine having a crazy snow and ice year, and you happen to have a really bad health insurance year, and you have to put $1 million on that, $1 million snow and ice. So that's how some of these towns are getting
The
themselves
thing
in
is,
trouble.
what you're gonna have to do to help mitigate your costs is you're gonna have to brainstorm how you're going to set up your insurances, particularly, you mentioned the individual and the deductibles. They're killers. I mean, a $4,000 deductible's a killer
Yeah.
for a low-income individual.
It is.
So, there are ways you can do that, but you have to be clever.
Yes.
And you have to be willing to do it, and it takes a lot of work.
And this is one of the obviously one of the big things I wanted Kelly in here for, is to have this debate, because, I mean, obviously healthcare is a significant expense for this town. We always see those double-digit or high single-digit increases every year. So we will have Kelly in here, if I can get her in here next meeting to discuss this, because it is something I really,
She is the right
I
person.
want. That's why I hate piling this on Zach, because although he has many expertise,
He
I don't
always
think
does well.
I don't think healthcare is his number one. So we will have Kelly in to have this discussion because I think it's a much needed and overdue discussion that we haven't had. I can't think of the last time we had the healthcare discussion.
No, we've been pushing it down the road. Yeah.
Yes.
Zach, do you still have your insurance consultant?
Yes, we do. Yep.
Okay, we're working on it with our consultant also. And hopefully by the end of, well, before July, we'll have something, and we'll share it with you.
Awesome.
We're kind of trying to attack and using the reinsurance here and the reinsurance there to mitigate the bottom line for the town, so that if we hit that number, then the reinsurance kicks in and, you know, we'll share it with you.
Awesome.
See
Sounds
what
like a
happens.
plan. Yep. Very good. I will say one last thing. I can't tell the number yet because it's got to go through the insurance advisory, all that, and I don't want to steal Kelly's thunder, but the renewal rate looks pretty good. Happy with it. So,
Sorry about that.
see
Is
this.
it better than 4.8?
But very, 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 very close.
That's what ours came in at, 4.8 down there, yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is the reason we get paid those big stipends. Let's talk about next year's
stipends?
budget.
I think there's enough there.
So here's the big boy.
There you go.
First round of planning for FY19.
First round, here we go, sorry.
Balance sheet, as we call it. It's really a P&L.
Mega $1 million.
This is built after we had our initial goal-setting process done purposely so that we're able to formulate this based on the needs, targets we really want to hit this year. So put together by Paul, who typically does. I'll start with the revenue. We'll go right through it. So I always say Prop 2.5, highly predictable, because it is. It's always what it could have been, not where we actually left off last year, what we could have done. And last year we had close to 3.3 million in excess levy, so that 67 million, very top number on the left, is inclusive of that 3.2. That's where we could have targeted. And then this year, obviously, it could be raised 2.5% without an override or debt exclusion, and then you add in your new growth. We jumped, I should say, new growth to 600,000. Last year, we used a factor of 5, well, to start. Past probably 5 years in a row, it's been over 500,000. Last year, I believe it was 809, am I correct? Well, so we felt this was more realistic of a figure to use. And on top of it, we also know from the assessor that we're probably gonna hit this target, as there's a few known projects that are coming on board, and it's a good number. So a little more realistic. So at the tax level, the raise and appropriate level, we have the ability to hit to 70 million. Local receipts, we stuck very close to last year, which if you look at the red books we distributed, if you ever looked at the revenue from budgeted to actual, we came within 99.97%. So I just love saying that because that's so close on $100 million. It's awesome. So we felt it's actually at this board's direction. I think it was Phil that really got to me, that wanted to kind of tighten up free cash after we had a couple stellar years. And I was open about how I felt it was in local receipts was a large contributor. So we did go less conservative last year, hence being more on target. And I feel this is a good number again this year. So it's not too much higher than last year. We really looked at motor vehicle excise, increased that by 1%, well, right around there. Room occupancy, we kind of level funded, so kind of comes out in the wash a little bit, but the total number is good. It's conservative, it's right there. When you look at state aid, everyone's probably seen the cherry sheet, first round governor's budget has come out. That number of 28,342,000 is at 4.25% over last year. This is not the governor's budget. The governor's budget is actually around $450,000 higher. I personally was quite shocked at how large the number was. I believe the percentage was at the receipt level was over 6%, so I was totally shocked at that. So we feel being conservative as we are, that we didn't want to just jump that number on as it could totally go down. Hopefully it stays the same. If it does, it'll only help us out a little bit better. So for now, we use 4.25 just in case as it goes through the various stages, it does get cut.
And that's year over year from last year, you're saying?
Correct. Yep. Offsets, those just, again, we put the gross number on the cherry sheet. There's two pieces that comes in as a receipt that are not general fund. Small piece of close to 40,000 that goes to public libraries, and the school choice piece that goes into the school choice revolving fund that's used at the school uses. Flip side of it, assessments on the right side there. A couple things to note. One, that is the exact governor number. Two, we were looking out for the MWRTA payment to finally hit the assessments. It's there. We were anticipating it to be 50,000. It is 50,000. So I'm pleasantly surprised there because I was not too optimistic that that was going to be the number. There was no guarantee that there was going to be state aid that was coming into the picture. State aid that was not done through the town, done directly from the state to the MWRTA. And that was, at the time, projected to be 1/2 of the 250, so 125. Apparently it was, so that's good news. And at the end of fiscal 17, literally on June 30th, we cut a check from the Chinar 6 funds of 75,000 that we had and sent directly to the MWRTA. I was worried that that possibly could have got lost in translation as well. It didn't, so that's good. It's there. It's the number we all hoped for, so that's good. Largest piece of that pie is school choice. It dropped a little bit from last year, but a little bit. So it looked like, I think it was 5,000 less than
Yeah,
what
5
it
or
was
10,000,
last
yeah.
year. I do have,
What's in that number?
Are
then?
they zeroing it out, Zach,
No, you're not.
out and in?
oh, there's a net negative.
700,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, right, yeah.
A huge number. It's not close.
Yeah.
It's been huge for 10 years, and we need to fix it.
On the
Yeah,
FY nineteen governor's
Gotta
budget,
get fixed.
Gotta change the law.
the out is close to 1.3 million, and the in is 600,000.
Simplistic solutions. You're not gonna have
You're on TV.
You're on mic. It's the highest.
Okay, I'm sorry. My apologies.
You can complain about it, but
That number
use
upsets me.
different words.
I did put together a little trend analysis. I didn't bring it with me. I think I'm gonna put it on the drive. I gave it to Jerry. I think I gave it to Mr. Soers as well. Basically, just gave a history of the last 10 years of in and outs from school choice and kind of displays the trend of where it started going the other way around. So, also, did you find those links helpful that I sent you? Yeah.
I did a data analysis. Do you know
Yeah.
what our net number is of the 351 towns? We're 15th worst town in the state.
Wow.
That's how far we've dropped. We're within 15 towns of being in the rock bottom, the Linds and the Lowells, as far as the net school choice.
On the
number.
choice, yeah.
I pulled
The
it.
towns that are in the program.
Every town's in the program.
Not necessarily.
Okay, but there's 351 towns, so you're
They
talking
can be
about.
sending, but they don't necessarily have to be receiving schools.
I did this calculation, plus minus, and we're number 15 out of 300 plus districts. And I was like, I sorted them, you wanna say? I was amazed.
You cannot prevent one of your students from leaving. Only thing you can do is prevent them coming in.
I understand that, but this trend has been going on for 10 years. If you look back, it's been declining for 10 years. And I just don't think that we really recognize the problem as, we need to recognize the problem.
I
do
think,
something about
I think
it.
some of us have recognized.
I think it's been brought up enough from this
But I don't see
board.
the school committee do anything about it.
I know that this board recognizes, and I think that they have, and they've been proactive. Whether they've achieved the goals that they want to achieve is obviously a different question. I think this board is very cognizant of the school choice differential that's occurred over the last 10 years. To your point, you're 100% on point, and I think that this board has been pretty adamant about, we need to turn the tide. I think the school committee is aware that we are aware, and they know themselves, and, they have programs instituted. How successful they are, obviously, that's a personal judgment, and I'm not gonna say how I feel. But my point is, I don't think that is getting under anyone's radar. I think
Well,
it's,
I've talked to them, I'm afraid they're not aware of it.
well, Jerry, I can't judge your personal opinion, but I think that they're aware of it. And we just, obviously, the success rate is measured
Just
differently by different people.
Just real quick, because we had a subcommittee with the school, on a student per student basis, we narrowed the gap 7 students. So the dollar numbers got larger, but on the student, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike.
That's
but
right, it was a net save.
Net 7, there
Seven.
was 5 fewer that choiced out, 2 more that choiced in.
If you look at the formula, and I finally dug down deep in the formula that you gave me, they only use 5,000 as the number. They don't use the actual number to create these deficits, and so if you did the actual number, it would be almost double that number. State plugs a $5,000 number for each one of those students. And I don't wanna keep crying wolf over this thing, but it's not fixed.
I don't think you're crying wolf at all, Jerry, and I, once again, but I just want you to know, I think if you look around this table, all of us,
If you brought the
No,
police,
it's an
if you
issue.
brought the police chief in here and he was a $500,000 deficit every year, you wouldn't tolerate it. That's what this is.
Jerry, I'm completely agreeing with you, and that's a conversation for the school subcommittee, and then our committee when we had the schools in here as well. Jerry, I'm not saying that anything you're saying is untrue.
Concerned.
I think all of us are concerned.
Can I jump ahead on the quiz here? So, are we saying, Zach, that we're within 100,000 between revenues and expenditures, but that's if we use the full 2.5? Is that
No.
what I'm supposed to be gleaning from
If
this?
see, on the right-hand side, on the lower columns
levy
there,
adjustment.
see the levy adjustment, FY18 levy adjustment?
Bottom right-hand corner.
Oh, I
That's the
see.
exact number
I
of
see.
excess from last year, so we're saying right off the bat, if
Okay.
we're setting that last meeting, we set that as a goal to match it
Yep.
minimally. So right off the bat, we're saying we're not gonna touch that money, so really add that plus the 131.
Okay.
And that's assuming we do 1.5 in capital, I'm not sure it's gonna be that high.
Right,
Which one for cap fund?
1.5 million.
1.5.
for projects, estimate.
I think we're gonna use that, aren't we, guys?
Can we just start back?
Yep.
Sewer?
Yep.
And at the end, we'll do it. I think it was a good question, Andy, but if we
Yep,
can do
you got
it,
it.
because otherwise we're gonna end
Yeah,
up jumping around
absolutely.
and,
Thank you, yep.
so we're at sewer receipts.
Sewer department, just as a refresher, that number 4,172,000 is exactly offset on the expenditure side. So that's meant to display it, because this sheet right here very much replicates the tax recap worksheet. I love it, it's perfect, it hits all the major targets, and it helps you predict and to be able to really take charge of what the recap will be, and we've been doing really good hitting our targets, which is awesome on $110 million. So again, 4 million here, 4 million on the other side, so it washes out. You don't see here, which I want to talk about, but we'll bring that to the end after I go through the rest of the sheet, is the water company, so stay tuned. So switch over to the right-hand side, that covered our revenue stream as we see it right now. Potentially, just to recap again, potentially could go up for cherry sheet, hopefully it does. Levy and local receipts, probably right on right there. So, operational budget via Article 4 at the May town meeting coming up is our largest expenditure for the year. We have right now a projected $102.5 million budget without a water company number in there. See some notes on the bottom, basically use just for projection purposes right now, we use 2.5% overall for the majority of the departments, with the exception of a few that we know are going to be higher. And for instance, we discussed retirement at the last meeting and trying to get to a situation where we're fully funded by 2035. Seem to have a lot of support here as well as the Board of Selectmen, so the retirement board did meet and we did vote to accept that funding schedule. So we plugged in the 6.5 for retirement. And right now, we're using 6.5 also for health insurance. We'll see how that pans out, but for now, that's a good number. Couple other departments, we did use higher than 2.5, for instance, the school and the big boys, as I call them, the public safety accounts. You want to mention where they're at now with the school? You want to hold up?
We'll do that in subcommittee report.
Okay, perfect. So you'll see these numbers fluctuate up and down, hopefully down, but overall, for right now, it's a good number. Again, keep in mind, I want to keep drilling everyone, especially the subcommittees, that there are a number of contracts, union contracts that will expire at the end of this year, and they really should be not anticipating what type of increase might be coming down the line. They really should be waiting to have the actual contract negotiated, and then if need be, come back to supplement the budget. So when doing your reviews, I know I'll be looking for that and advising to that. Please take a look at that. And Tom, if you wanted to give a quick update on those as a reminder.
As far as who's expiring?
Correct.
Library expires, good.
No, I'm gonna get to Jerry's.
Clarification on that, because with this always gets twisted and turned during this budget process. We're not to fund any union increases until the contract is done. If need be, we'll go back to town meeting and get the money.
Correct.
Okay, do not plan for those increases.
Correct.
Because you impact the negotiation by doing that.
Correct. Yep.
Contracts expiring in library, police, dispatcher still hasn't been finalized, right?
Has not.
And that expired June of 2017.
That could be a 2-year deal. They were in front of the selectmen, but they can't really lead on to where they're at.
And the School Admin Association,
Yep, school is going to be a big one, yes.
teachers are in August.
Teachers, yep. same
Teachers
here.
when?
August
August.
2018. Well, most of the others are all 19, 20.
Police teachers alone.
But we have, you used the word big boys earlier on. These are the big boy contracts that are up now. As you mentioned, between police, fire, and public safety.
Teachers previously been 3 years?
They usually have been signing 3 years, but obviously, you never know from negotiation to negotiation, but Jerry, you're exactly right, it's usually been 3 years.
Yes.
But we have some serious negotiations going on with big tickets. We're not talking about Burning Grove here, we're talking about big dollars.
So also from that standpoint, we've got to be very cognitive of smoke and mirrors of here's our budget, we did great, October comes and oh no. So just kind of be aware of that, we'll plan along the way. But again, for now, we feel this is a good approach, and ultimately, I don't think that Article 4 really should stray too far from that number, so stay tuned. Bottom right-hand corner, usually we're putting our goals and objectives here. Stabilization, $500,000. I've been asked recently, because we have a decent balance. You have that, financial facts there?
I wanted to talk until I
Yeah,
signed it.
we do have a decent balance in our stabilization. I have been asked, hey, when's enough enough? I said, well, take a look at our liability side. We have a lot in debt. We have a pair of $60 million liabilities between pension and OPEB. So, no, we're not good yet. We'll keep it going. And you never do know, and you have to tap into it. And hopefully we don't end up looking like the state, where they had to tap into. We had this discussion this time last year. And I did read in the Beacon that the state is looking to apply a healthy portion, a very large amount into their stabilization, so I was glad to see that as well. But right now, the end of December 2017, between our two accounts, we're at $21,464,000.
That's, that doesn't
Stabilization.
include some other accounts, does it? No.
It includes two. Our long-term or a classic stabilization, which is 17.3, and our capital at 4.1. Both, technically speaking, are undesignated funds, but we do know we have some earmarks, if you will, within the long-term account.
Yeah, what's that? I forget.
Oh, we want to, point being, we want to continue to be sure we earmark our annual contribution. It's just healthy, it's good planning.
Is that translation on overlay? I'm sure somebody's told me before. but-
Overlay is the account that's for exemptions and abatements and could be, it's not really bad debt, but it's for,
Appellate court.
yeah, appellate court.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
So elderly,
Appellate court?
It's a reserve account, right?
it's a reserve account, that-
Somebody is,
it's like allowance for bad debt.
their valuations.
Okay.
Typically commercial properties.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
It's a reserve
It's,
account.
it's like an abatement
It's almost a
reserve or
wash.
something like
It
that.
is,
And
yep.
that's pretty much exactly what it is.
And the way it works is it increases, that's why it's on your right-hand side, it increases what you have to raise and appropriate, because it's like, I'm gonna give you a break, but everyone else is gonna pay for it. So,
Came up with
we-
that term, overlay. It sounds like something the Federal Reserve would do.
yeah.
Probably something from the 20s.
We, while we're talking about that, we do have a very healthy balance in our overlay, that's collective from all years. Modernization Act had eliminated the necessity to track it year to year, however, we still are in Milford. It's already set up that way, I think
Oh,
it's
so
better.
do we set up money, the 632 gets set aside, and if it doesn't get used, it
That's a
builds?
reserve
Is that what we're doing? Okay.
It stays, yeah.
That's like a savings account.
Yeah.
Okay.
For people
And
who
then
don't pay their tax.
periodically, from my office, I'll write a letter to the assessors saying, hey, looking at the balance that we have in prior years of actual receivables, your overlay is actually higher, please release some. And then you, technically speaking, could use the overlay as an appropriation. However, the way we've been treating it is to just, I do my accounting work and it closes out to free cash.
Free cash, right?
Yep,
Okay.
so I will be actually writing a letter in the next month or two.
Is the overlay in here? Is the overlay in here someplace?
Yeah, you'll see it on the combined balance sheet, or A1. A1 is the general fund balance sheet. It's called allowance, it doesn't say allowance for abatement and
What's it, about
exemptions.
900,000?
It's closer to 2 million,
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's on that.
yeah, might be 1.8, something like that.
Okay.
Anyway, we're in good shape there. There'll be and I'd say it's kind of been a tradition that we release those funds annually. It helps out with our free cash position, so in good shape and, don't wanna mess with it, so we've been using a similar number. That actually represents, basically 1% of what your overlay, of what your full tax levy is.
What kind of latitude do we have using that? Is that like, can we pull that out of there without,
Assessors have to close it out at my request.
so we do have some flexibility there.
Yeah, yep, so, and usually, there's been a year or two where I haven't, because the balance wasn't as significant as it needed to be, or it might be a year where we don't need it, and that's kind of our little other rainy day fund there, you know? But I will be writing in probably 300,000-400,000 that closed out of it, you know? And to Paul's point, there are cases that are tied up where, in appellate court, where they potentially could get settled, come back and say, hey, you guys need to pay them, and that's where this will ultimately come from. There's a lot of accounting that goes behind it. I know, like the shell game a little bit, but ultimately it would come out of the overlay.
Ultimately, you could take a hit, in other words. You could
Theoretically.
Theoretically, and a couple
Yep.
of, couple court cases
I'll
could
give
go
you a
against.
classic example. So 2 years ago, last year, it was called the Verizon case. All their telephone lines and whatnot and cabling going around was considered personal property, so they were paying taxes on their quote-unquote personal property. They had been paying it for years and they had been fighting it in court for years. Finally, just last year, court settled and said, you know what? You don't have to pay. So we had to turn around and reimburse them. I believe it was upwards of $600,000 for each fiscal year, every town. Yeah, so that's one of the reasons the balance was that high. But there are a bunch of other examples of just that, just not that significant.
I'm sure you saw a reduction in your Verizon.
We monitor it, and again, it's kind of been tradition the way we've been treating it. So we'll continue to do so. The assessments, we covered right off the governor's sheet. Capital projects, 1.5. On the face of it, it doesn't look like it's going to be that high, but we'll see in October. So Right now, with the warrant being open, we have not seen any capital come in, except for I know one will be coming in, which will be election booths that the town clerk will need. I think she discussed it with you, I'm not sure. Okay.
Is that something we put on capital or just put it on?
She has it on capital. She was trying to wait for October, but they're
How
in
much is it?
really rough shape. It's probably gonna be 40 grand.
You can just put it in office expense.
Yeah. She doesn't have an office expense, I think.
Good try though, Joe.
Yeah, you know, this, when you're looking at these numbers, that they're just phenomenal, in fact, I just, if you need it, justify it and
Yep.
put forth the case and.
She'll be in front of you guys to talk about it, so. just
I think
giving
our
you a
best
heads up.
number, I think our best number is the next number.
Which one?
3.29 million, yep. So that's what Andy was alluding to earlier. That's our levy adjustment, that's our excess, that's where last year we could have taxed that high. We did not, so called it levy relief. We've been playing the matching game for a number of years now. I was even skeptical of our ability to do so. And through tight planning, we have. So I see no reason why we can't continue.
This is the same number we used last year?
It grew 100,000 or 90,000. So we're at last year, FY18, this is pretty much the exact number, just rounded. The year before was 3.2, year before was 3 even, pretty much. So,
It's been growing.
yeah, it's really cool. It's good. It's a good sign. So if you kind of think about it, what that really means when you're playing the matching game there is that back to your top left-hand side, really means you're only increasing 2.5%, which is cool, you know? And then you have your new growth factor come in. But, which again was one of our targets that we set as goals and objectives, keep 2.5, right? So rather than seeing lumpy increases, maybe 1 year you actually have a little reduction, following year another lumpy large increase. It's kind of slow and steady planning here. So again, no reason not to believe we won't hit that target. All said and done, surplus of 131,000. Not a huge number, but
Better than a deficit.
it's better than a deficit, and as we spoke earlier, our main objective at this time, our town meeting, is to present a balanced budget. You see exactly that right here. And, don't lose this, all of that done without recognizing free cash at all. And free cash is over 3 million right now.
I like that.
So that's sitting on the sidelines.
That's on the sidelines.
That's in the
Yeah.
savings account per se, or
Yeah, exactly.
You don't have to identify it on this sheet somewhere, Zach?
this is not a balance sheet, this is a P&L.
I know. but you could
Yeah,
still
we
make a
call it the
reference.
balance sheet, but really it's a P&L.
It's right here.
Before I open it up, I just need to really compliment Zach and Tom and Paul. Getting all this information and putting together is not something that you do in an hour, and I know how much hard work it is to put all this together. I also want to compliment how you balance both conservative and realistic numbers, because when you referred to Phil earlier, people don't like it if we're too conservative. I understand that, and that's why when we get these crazy free cash numbers, I know a lot of them were for other reasons, whether it was the health insurance and all that kind of stuff. But it's a tightrope of being conservative, but being accurate. And I know that we're very conservative on some areas, and not as conservative. But on the whole, looking at this, I think we are on the line.
Yeah.
We towing the line between being too conservative and being accurate. And I think when you come down and you got a $110 million budget, and our surplus right now is only 131,000, I know that seems like a lot of money. That is razor thin.
Yes, it is.
That is
Definitely.
razor thin
At
on a
this
$110
time,
million
it
budget.
is, yeah.
So obviously, any deviation on anything in here, and obviously the biggest deviation is going to be Article 4, can have a significant impact on that bottom number. So with that being said, I want to open it up for anybody with comments, questions for the two of them.
Don't forget about, he has a partner up there that helps him too, is Chris, does a
Yep.
great
Oh,
job.
of course, yeah.
I mean,
He couldn't make it tonight.
I know, he's buying a car, so I wasn't gonna.
Yeah.
Don't leave him out
No,
of the
absolutely no,
compliment, 'cause
and-
he has his number on the
No.
bond rate, like by the hour.
Absolutely, Jerry, very good point. Chris does a fantastic job. Everybody up in those offices.
Very helpful,
You do great.
very helpful,
We have
thank
an
you.
Do a
awesome
great
team.
job.
It's a good game plan, Zach.
So with that being said, comments, questions for Tom or Zach?
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I heard, at the school subcommittee, they were talking about an emergency for a freezer, which was significant dollars, right? That was not for this article?
60K, I think it was, wasn't it? 60K.
Capital, right?
Right, it was gonna go on the capital plan. I think they need to touch base with Al,
They were gonna touch base with Al, but to Jeff's point, I don't know that it was gonna last till October.
right?
So we have not I know that I have not received anything in writing, and I don't
No.
believe you have.
No, I've not.
So until I
What
receive
is it?
anything in writing, or Mike receives anything in writing,
What
there's
is it?
no transfers
A
to it.
freezer,
The freezer's kicking out up at the high school, which obviously it stores all the food for the whole system. So they were talking about, it was either 60 or 80, I can't remember, about needing that sooner rather than later.
A reserve fund transfer?
They were kicking that around.
Wow.
Because I think they were trying to figure out how long it was gonna last.
Right.
And obviously, you know,
cover it to be.
yeah, and then they were gonna see if they can cover it. But obviously, we don't want
Yeah.
$10,000 of food to spoil
Oh, no.
for a $60,000 freezer.
Can't they
It's
cover
just
that
a big
and
placeholder.
reimburse their own
Oh,
account?
no, there's no question. Mr.
Can't they
Madonna.
cover it?
I'm just gonna say that, there certainly is funds available in free cash if we had to
Yeah.
use money
Yeah.
and replenish it, or an article at the May town meeting if it was something that was an emergency.
Look, they just gave us the information. They really didn't get too in-depth on it, on whether it's on its last legs or whether it was going, so.
If I may,
Yep.
I'm glad Paul brought that up. I did want to mention, we did have the same approach last year. I'd like to do the same again. Any articles that do come up at the annual town meeting, some may be required to be free cash, but I'd like to do, obviously besides the Article 4, anything that does come up out of free cash, which would make October all this right here. You know, so, again, I didn't see too many. Dispatchers may come up, possibly something like that, possibly elections. But if we hit our free cash account, snow and ice will be one of them, that it'll only be helpful to achieve this plan for October. Yeah.
Can't the school fund the freezer and then request a reimbursement? Because they have accounts of their own, they could pay for it out. They don't need to come to us.
Once again, until I get a letter,
Yeah, they haven't said they're out of it without a freezer, and we're planning an article in the spring to do it, but again, yes, they can always pick up the phone and call us, or laptop.
It's like a maintenance item.
No, it's a replacement.
Ultimately, too, I didn't get to what all this means, why I was anxiously wanting to come here, too, is tomorrow I would like to release the budget guidelines. What I proposed to the selectmen, which they voted in favor of for this year, is to put out a directive to build, it's kind of hand in hand what we talked about with a lot of these contracts that will be expiring, to build your salaries and wage budget based on known contractual obligations, and to have no increase in general expenses this year. We say that because we know there's quite a few Article 2 employees that will be stepping. We looked at it the other day, there's a lot of them, and the steps are not 2.5%. Some of them are upwards of 3.5%, 4%. So that's gonna put a strain, as we've been seeing for the past few years, on the salary side, and the necessity to try to keep your general expenses level funded. Now, I'm sure there'll be a few departments that either have initiatives, can't handle it, small dollar increase, whatnot. So I'd like to see them come forward to subcommittees, to the full committee, to have it justified, blessed, all that good stuff.
Some of the, if I may, a couple of our departments, particularly in public safety, their budget is 90+%
Correct.
salary, so there's a whole lot of maneuvering that has to go to take care of it, so, yeah, we need to have a game plan, because
Those guys do well.
we can't always do what we'd like to do. We're gonna have to do what we need to do.
Correct. Yep.
With that being, oh, I'm sorry.
Some of the budget guidelines in prior times that went out to the department heads, I'm not sure that we actually received the same letter as a reference copy. Could we make sure we get that this year?
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah, they haven't gone out yet. We're gonna do that tomorrow, if not Friday. And I was gonna run a copy by you first, so we can put it up on the drive so everyone has the ability to access it as well.
Are we gonna do a department by department, total aggregate, no more than increase amount, or are we gonna?
I think the way that Zach just phrased it, you're not necessarily putting a number on it. Well, you are putting a number on general expenses, which is 0. And you're making salaries and wages go up with what is contractually obligated right now,
Yep.
not for the future.
Correct.
So that's pretty cut and dry. I mean, there really isn't any, it's what the contract is, which is what we do, not what it could be. So what the contract currently has been agreed upon, 0% for general expenditures. And then if we need to backfill later on, we will backfill later on for any contracts that were negotiated after the budget's been approved. So,
To Aldo's point, if you put out the straight up just 2%, you're forcing them to cut into the only 10% that they have for all your equipment, all your everything, your office supplies.
Trading salaries for safety equipment.
Exactly.
It's always been,
Which
always been a challenge.
Which has happened a lot of years, but I think it's to a point where you're gonna see some of these departments, they just can't handle it. And you're gonna, if we put out 2%, you're gonna see, hey, I got 3.5, all this other stuff. So, I don't think it'll be, I think you'll see some with 3.5, but we use 2.5 because we think that's what it'll end up being.
It'll be fine. That's fine.
We
It'll work.
always get
It'll
there
work.
every year, so.
Yes, we do.
We moan and we groan, but we vote and
Confident we'll be in
we
good
come
shape
back
this year.
tomorrow to live again.
So we have 100,000, for the reserve fund, correct?
103.
And how much are we using for the elections?
We have that as a topic that Tom will take the floor on, and now?
well, I would like to get a recommendation, a favorable recommendation on that directive to be sent out to department heads, as Zach has said, 0% expenses, salary to meet contract obligations, current contract obligations. Anyone wanna make a
Make a
motion?
motion.
I'll second that motion.
Jeff,
Go ahead.
motion seconded by Chuck. All those in favor for a directive of that saying? Excellent, unanimous.
Awesome. 2 other topics
Snow
while
and
we're
ice.
here. Snow and ice. Want to jump into that one quick?
I don't, yeah.
So right now, we're at deficit status. We need approval to continue deficit status.
You took a vote, didn't they, the other night?
They don't need approval. It's not required.
Yeah, it's, Modernization Act is no longer required for the FinCom to approve it. However, I promised I would come forward year after year and get the approval anyway, so.
Just to give us a
We
report.
could
What
be
is it?
magnanimous and say
How
absolutely.
bad is it right now, Zach?
We're at about 40,000,
Oh,
so
that's-
about 6.5% deficit.
That's all?
Yeah.
You're only 40,000
We had
over
a
the
lot of
original
weekend
900,000?
storms too.
600.
Double time is double time and a half, so.
Original was 600, I thought we moved it up.
Moved up from 5.
Don't move it up because you can never move it down.
Yeah.
Saves us money.
Yeah, but then it's always a deficit.
It's better than having something you can't
Well, then it just
spend.
drops
You can spend.
Now, he
it.
doesn't need our approval, but
Mike's absolutely right.
yeah.
What do you want to put salt down when there's no need to put, just to use it? That's right.
In the past, that money has dropped to some other activity in the highway department, if there's any surplus.
No,
We
I
don't
Free
don't,
cash. It drops to free cash if you don't spend it.
but we've never,
We have,
you know.
we've actually reallocated it.
With that being said, I know with the MMA, we don't need an approval, but just as a support for his department and the fact that Zach does come in here to ask for that, I would like a favorable recommendation on that. Does anyone want to
I'll
make
make that motion too.
What we're doing is just agreeing with the selectmen's
Exactly.
action, because we don't have any right to
It's- no.
supersede that.
But I like to support our department heads when they ask for this.
Absolutely.
What was the biggest contributor? Because we didn't have much snow. Was it
A lot of ice,
salt?
Snow and salt, yeah.
Salt purchases?
Yeah.
Salt. It's
Well,
very,
Anti truck goes
Also,
to
they do outsource a lot
Austin
of
all the time.
contractors when you do have those storms, it's, all hands on ship.
That last one with the rain and the ice
We
was
had a Christmas storm, which
No,
was
no, no,
probably
I know.
triple time for people.
Oh, double time and a half.
rained and then it
That's
froze.
exactly what.
And then
It was the Christmas storm, I know that when
You were
talking.
getting $80, $90 an hour people.
All right, that being said, I got a motion by Jeff for a favorable recommendation, a second by Aldo. All those in favor? I know it's completely useless, but I like to do it anyway.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Yep.
So,
If Al
Tom's
Korea
first.
was here, he would say no more snow or ice for the rest of the year, right?
We're the forecast.
basically, we're requesting a transfer from the emergency fund. Due to the elections.
Thank you.
This particular year, there's 2 additional elections that we didn't know about.
Maybe Fran, you got extra?
Why didn't we know about it?
Got a couple more?
Hey, oh,
You know
hey,
about it? Well,
Fran,
It's the 2 marijuana
Oh, okay, yeah, all right.
referendums,
Right, right, right.
which one's gonna be in March and April, I believe.
Yeah.
whatever.
So as of right now, if you look at page 3, and if you have any questions, 1 and 2 will kind of outline, excuse me. So as of right now, there's about $9,800 in the election account. There is a grant that we have access to, which is about another $8,000. So that's approximately $17,000 to $18,000. It's outlined here what the actual elections cost between, I don't think that, never been asked to use the mic, but there's, between the police detail, the election workers, the total, and the printing and the media part of it, the total amount necessary for the 2 elections would be approximately $53,000.
The 2 additional ones.
The 2 additional ones. No, I'm all set. And as a result of that, being only 17,000 in there, knowing it's gonna be 53, we're requesting to transfer from the emergency fund approximately $36,000 to cover them.
So move, Mr. Chairman. I don't have a choice.
Motion by Aldo, second by Jerry. Any conversation?
Page 2 should answer some of your questions, Jim.
I mean, we have to do it.
This is, it's unfortunate we have to spend this kind of money for an interim election, but it is what it is, so.
This is the 2 elections, because one's the town election, right? And one's the
That one
special.
we have
right?
money for.
There's only 1 election, yes, there's only, because the other marijuana was September.
Right, but it was in this fiscal year and wasn't budgeted.
The April election was the only one that we anticipated during this time last year.
Right.
And then what was it,
September.
September,
You paid for the
wasn't
old
known
one.
at the time, so that's the only one that
That's included.
occurred thus far. And now the one we knew about has to come, but we already
Okay.
So I
spent the money on the
misquoted.
other
No,
one.
understood, no, it's okay.
But you're exactly right.
Yes,
It's,
you are.
one's an old one.
Yes.
Only one new.
September
One
and
was
March.
planned for and budgeted.
Okay, right.
The regular, this,
The regular.
the
one.
April election is
It's the
planned.
2 marijuana ones that were not planned is what we're paying for. Only one we still have to do.
September,
But
March.
the
I
bill,
misquoted.
but the bill is for 2 of them.
Right.
Did I see your mic?
I'm sorry?
Did I see your hand? No?
Nope, nope, nope.
I had a motion by Aldo, a second by Jerry, for an approval of an emergency transfer of $35,194.50. Oh, is that what you asked for? Did you ask for
36,000.
36.
I apologize. I apologize. So I had a motion by Aldo, a second by Jerry for an emergency transfer of $36,000 to cover these elections to the, account, the election account.
Town clerk.
What account is it?
162, it's on page 1 at the
Yep,
top.
to account 162. All those in favor? Unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, now that $36,000 have been transferred, just want to make sure that the school is aware that if they do need that freezer, and it does
There you go.
cost $80,000, we don't have the funds, then they're gonna have to cover at least part of it out of their own budget until the spring election.
Why it hurts
an
me when
excellent
you
point,
said
right.
that, yep.
Thank you
exactly.
very much for pointing that out, because I did not catch that.
Awesome.
Again, we haven't got a letter from them yet.
What, exactly?
Pony Express.
I just don't
Fire
want them to
request.
think we have the money.
Pony Express.
Well,
Yep, do it.
comment.
One last topic.
Let's keep going.
Oh, no, this should be the last one.
You will see in the budget package this year, a new policy that the selectmen adopted Monday night, which is going to be a request for employee form that you must fill out to come forward when such department is looking for someone. Not directly responsive to last year, when we had a couple that kind of came out of the blue, if you will, but meant to try to eliminate that surprise factor. I want this board, this committee to be fully aware that this is not whatsoever an invitation for a wish list of every department who is looking for someone to think that they're gonna fill this out and they're gonna fill in their budget with this new employee, from whatever department it may be, in there. It's simply meant to enhance our policies and procedures and planning for the future. So I do anticipate that quite the few departments more than likely are gonna fill it out, possibly have the mode of thinking that if they do that, they get a new employee, but that is not the case at all. So,
I suggest you have that on the document that they fill out.
we talked about that. Yeah, it is on the document, for one,
Oh, I-
and it's very
Bold
much,
print.
yeah, it's very much going to be,
This is a survey,
yeah, basically.
not an audit.
Proposal.
I'm worried.
Wish list.
I'm worried of the careful what you wish for factor. I'm worried a lot of people are gonna see this as an invitation, and it's not that. It's meant to enhance communication. It's meant to get a board like this, selectmen, myself, other departments, aware of what may be coming down the line at some point. So just want to make sure that no one's surprised when they see that, and the intention is not to invite all sorts of different, I expect it's going to happen, but just be aware of that. And as far as the actual approval, nothing will change. It's still, we're encouraging that departments come forward, discuss it. We're also encouraging that they go through proper avenues and communicate rather than just submit a budget. So I didn't have a copy with me. I will put it on the drive. It's also meant to encompass all required expenses of a new employee, whether it's health insurance, which is a large number, whether it be a new computer, office supplies, all this other good stuff, as well as a series of justifications that must take place also.
Pension?
There's, yep,
Pension
absolutely,
number?
there's pension impact, there's OPEB impact, which is where, page 2 is the finance director's review, where I will make sure that all those numbers are in there. There's also the town administrator's review, where he could more be on the side of justification. If it's really necessary, we move it forward. And there's also a section for the Board of Selectmen actually vote to move it forward.
What's gonna be the circulation of that document?
I'm directed to put it in the budget package, so it will be in this year.
I'm sorry, should have been more clear. When the department head or the sponsor proposes, where is that document gonna be transmitted to, and who's gonna see it?
It'll be centralized with the town administrator, almost trying to mirror the capital plan, if you will.
That's my concern, because if it goes to town administrator and the person sitting in general government or sitting over in the library that's never sees it, then we get blindsided again. There's some of that happened last year in last year's budget. Some of those people that were proposed, it was kind of like, it was more barroom talk than it was
Drop it on you
official
during a
talk.
subcommittee meeting.
Huh?
They'll drop it on you during a subcommittee meeting, you don't even know it was coming.
And we're the people that need to know first, so we can plan the budget out.
That's the exact intent of what I'm hoping this is going to be, and not to what I was describing as what could be a nightmare, you know? So, not only, to answer your question, it's not gonna be sitting in a folder in the corner where no one can see it. We're gonna make sure that copies get forwarded to this committee. We're gonna make sure the selectmen are aware. We'll probably put it on the drive.
I think it's great, and I think it's fantastic, because then, like Mr. Nicholson said, if somebody comes up in a subcommittee meeting or a budget meeting, getting ready for next year's budget, and we haven't seen it, we don't have to recognize it. I mean, we just move on, and because he's experienced it, I've experienced it, you just catch up on, out of the blue, you think you're in good shape going into the budget cycle.
But I think as long as we know ahead of time that what the document looks like, and they throw one at us in the subcommittee meeting, we know that we're just gonna dismiss it right away, because it has nothing to do with our discussions.
Correct.
Right, so we need to be able to identify it.
And the other thing I'd like to chime in on there is that everybody thinks they have to go hire a new employee to get a certain issue taken care of. It might be the Parks Department, I got this project, I've got to get, okay. You don't have to hire a new employee, you can hire part-time people that don't bring with them health insurance and pension obligations, complete the job and then evaluate, take a second evaluation and see if you need to go on. But I just get this, and what concerns me the most, and you and I've had this discussion, is people don't understand how much benefits are. He talked about healthcare at 20,000, pension obligations don't show up anywhere in the employment process. And I think we just need to get a handle on this, because the pension obligations are just growing.
Absolutely.
They're
And
20
some
years-
of what you were talking about is on this form. I wish I brought copies. I didn't.
I think it's great, because it starts to bring into the whole
Yeah.
scope of things. Because my pushback is, before I'm gonna hire a full-time employee, I'm gonna look at the options of contracting it out and see if the job continues to need to be done. And before I hire a full-time employee, I'm gonna bring them on part-time.
That's another part of this intent.
Do we really need to put somebody on for 30, thank you, I'm
Just
sorry.
a thought, Mr. Chairman, through you to the chairman of our subcommittees. They work with the chairman or the head of a department. Why don't we ask them to indoctrinate those people with the document, because they're not gonna come before my committee if that has not already been dealt with.
Yep.
Bingo. That should solve the problem.
Yeah.
Hopefully. That's the intent.
And
Always be hopeful.
I think the reason that that Zach is bringing up tonight is this was meant to update protocol, is really what it was. No one is saying, and this document was not adopted with the thought that we need to hire people, and I think that that's what needs to be conveyed. But unfortunately, we all know what perception is. The second you get a form that is sent to you that says new employee additions, to me, that's an invitation. So I think it's important, and that's why Zach wanted to bring it up tonight, that it's important that this was just updating the protocol, to update that the process was going to be better laid out than it ever has been before, and that form achieves that. So that's the big thing, and I think with all your department heads, it was just a heads up to everybody that this letter's gonna go there. Unfortunately, some people are gonna look at that form as a green light, but that's certainly not what the letter was intended to do, in my mind. So it was just to update protocols and procedures.
Piggyback on that, Mr. Chairman, if we can get or request some historic data, maybe going back 10 years about staffing levels in each department, so that when they ask for staff, we can kind of get a frame of reference of how they've grown over the last decade.
I'll have somebody put
Or
that
not
together for you.
grown,
Nope.
if that may be the
I could have
case.
Shannon in my office do that. She has to fill out the equal opportunity forms every year, and it gives detailed information of every department, so.
Good point, Mike. I'll get that put together. Anybody else have anything for these two esteemed gentlemen?
No, not Zach either.
All right, guys. Thank
Thank
you
you.
two very much. And thank you
Thanks,
very much,
guys.
Paul and Chris.
And Merry Christmas.
Appreciate it.
Christmas. I'll be nice to your wife. All right, guys, just a couple more things before we get you out of here. I have a couple subcommittee reports. If you're gonna stick around, you wanna do schools?
Well, Mr. Chairman, so at the invitation of the superintendent, we attended a preliminary budget meeting a week ago, Tuesday, right? In which they gave us probably the best package of an initial budget offering that we've seen for a while. They went into details. I don't think we should go into particular numbers yet, only because we're still talking, and we want to go back and give them our, since it was really an information load to us, we have to evaluate what we're doing as a subcommittee and keep person in that committee is on the beach somewhere near the dibby trees on Aruba right now, so I want to wait till he gets back. But it wasn't as bad as it could have been, and it gives us an opportunity, I think, to go forward. So I'll just say where we are. But to the point about putting a placeholder in for contracts, they actually had taken the position that this was one department that typically does that. And I know we approached that last year, and I think they want to do that, so if they're getting guidance not to do that, we'll have to address it
Yeah.
that way.
Because obviously, it is our policy to do it, and we've talked about that. They're tough to catch back up with.
Yeah.
The number is just so significant
Right.
with that contract. I normally don't like that strategy, but I also am very worried that to come up with that amount of money later on could be huge.
Could be tough.
We've always managed it in the past, though.
Yeah.
We've always managed it in the
Well,
past,
that's
very
what
well.
They would say
A lot of
that they-
times it's been built in, and I know being on the school subcommittee, you had anticipation, and once again, it's just something that happens once every 3 years. I know 3 years ago when I was on that subcommittee,
Don't,
I don't want to say a placeholder, but they definitely had anticipation of what the possible union negotiations could be. I will say that on the school subcommittee level, they did not reveal to us what that number is. We do not know.
No, they can't tell us how
Because they're still in
negotiations are going.
negotiation. It could be 1%, it could be 5%. We don't know.
And they could close before the budget cycle ends with the negotiations?
Oh, actually, that's a very good point. We had commitment by the school committee that they're doing the best they can to close the teacher budget by April 3rd, which is an election because they do have 3 members that are leaving. And they don't want on April 4th to basically restart negotiations with 3 members that don't know anything about school budgeting.
So their
So that's
budget-
very advantageous to us because we will know by April 3rd
Right, what it is,
what the number is. So technically, we won't have a placeholder.
right.
That's why we don't, but we, have a placeholder because.
You don't,
it-
but you
it-
do.
We don't, but we do. Because by April 3rd, hopefully it'll be cleared up.
Yeah, they talked about a few things about, obviously the freezer, they talked about, and in their budget are initiatives that they would like to see. Whether or not they make sense in the final package, we'll find out, but, so stay tuned, we'll go back I want to plan a meeting with them for a couple weeks, first week of March, second week of March, to go back to them, but we'll have a preliminary subcommittee meeting prior to that, hopefully a week from Saturday, is what I'm thinking about. Okay,
Thanks, Mike.
All
Tell
right.
me your wife.
all right. I actually have to go get her, she's at the hospital right now.
Oh, sorry.
Well, she's a nurse at the hospital.
That changes everything. Come on. You were using that as an excuse to leave. She's in the hospital. I didn't know it was just a regular pickup.
Mike,
Jerry, do
before you leave, just swing by here, please.
Yes, sir.
you want to do general government or no? You had a meeting. I didn't know if you wanted to
I had a
do
good meeting, I'm gonna leave it at that, there's some.
You sent me an
something
email.
possibly-
Brief. Yeah, boy,
You
Jerry.
were there.
I know, but it's your committee.
No, I was very pleased. The outcome was good.
Screwball.
Something just changed here in front of me tonight, but that's okay. This is fine. We talked about this.
It's the briefest you've ever been, Mr. Hyatt. I was giving you the floor and everything.
Take it while you got it.
I was just, good point, Ms. Nicholson. All right, we're done with you.
Maybe we'll have some good news
We're
on
done with you
next
then,
month.
Jerry.
It'll be fine.
If you're gonna surrender the floor, I'll always take it from you.
Thank you. Fine.
Any other subcommittee reports, guys?
No.
No, Jeff?
Just
You
a
said
que-
no, then you put your hand up.
just a question had a meeting with the youth center. And there's this study going around town that they're trying to look at all the buildings for ADA compliance and I don't know if we have any idea what the impact is, but they're talking about the brand new ramp went in for the Armory and it's not compliant, so it's like, and that's not the brand new ramp isn't, it's got too much of a slope, I don't even know what so it's like,
You
this is
better
not
go
the,
find a contractor and architect to fix it, because that,
but I mean, this is not the only building, my point is, it's not the only building, what's this?
What,
we have-
we have been participating in best practices, which is a mandate with the state that we have declared that IT and ADA, those two, right? There's not another one. I'm asking the press. I knew it, though. I was right.
There you go.
You just reassured me. I just wanted to be sure. But those two policies, we were going to develop best practices. Now, what best practices do when we enrolled with it in their program in the state allows us to be available to apply for grants in those areas, both in technology and ADA compliance. Obviously, in order to apply for those grants, you need to be active in those programs, such as improving our technology or allowing our building inspections to make sure that they are fully ADA compliant and that type of stuff. So those are the inspections that are going around building to building to ensure that we are meeting all best practices for ADA. Any improvements that need to be done, if an improvement needs to be done on a $5.6 million building that still has the new building smell to it, I would be very disappointed.
Yeah, but bear in mind, this is transition plan thing, you don't have to do it all.
No, I agree, but I'm just saying that would be a little disappointing. One second, Paul. That a project of that scope would need an improvement.
Well, right, I mean, you would think the ADA compliance
I-
would change
but-
when it was built. it
But
should
I
have
don't
been
want to speak on something that I don't know about.
We haven't seen the report.
That's my point. I don't want to get in a conversation about a building that doesn't meet, and maybe it does, and we're talking about something for no reason. I know I would be severely disappointed if I heard that it didn't meet. That report's gonna be done for all governmental buildings. But once that report, we'll have advice on what we could do, not necessarily what we have to. But once we have that report, we can go forward with grant applications, and also we can go through and see what improvements we do want to do and what we don't want to do. Mr. Mendoza.
Yeah, just one thing to keep in mind, sometimes with the ADA regulations, there could be a variance granted in the process because of the geography or the layout of whatever that doesn't allow it to actually meet what the code requires is. There may have been one of those on this project. So we would hope that when the architects approved it, that they had looked into that. So before we start saying it doesn't, it may be something that was already approved.
I couldn't agree with you. That's why I don't want to open the debate on what does or doesn't meet. All I know is I would be very disappointed if we spend $5.7 million on a building and it doesn't meet proper ADA compliance. So,
One quick
yeah,
thing.
Aldo.
On Monday night, the selectmen went through the proposals for the school, for St. Mary's, the middle school east. I received a couple of phone calls following that, and if you get a couple of calls from someone, I'm sure you will, remind them that it doesn't come here, because we really have no authority or no say in what happens. And I suggested that these folks, they're very interested, very concerned, so I suggested that they call town administrator, make their concerns known to the town administrator. For us to say something would be stepping on the selectmen's toes, because this is in our bailiwick, so to speak. So if you get the calls, I know the chairman has, I suggest that's what you might want to do. Direct them to Rick.
I think
It
that.
doesn't need a town meeting article?
It would need town meeting
Yes,
approval.
we will, it absolutely will.
So it will
But it'd
come
be
to this-
whatever
it has to
what the
come to this
selectmen put
committee.
on the warrant and everything.
Still has to
We
come
have to
this
chime
committee.
in.
Yep, and we will at that time, once we see the proposals.
What are they calling about?
But somebody has to come to us with it.
Exactly. And to that point, Aldo, and we had talked prior to the meeting, I have been getting calls about Middle School East. In fact, I was in Zach's office this afternoon, and someone stopped in to say hello to someone and said to me, "Are you tearing down my building over there that I went to high school?" It's a very emotional issue. But to Aldo's point, I am of the point that we are not going to I am not going to comment on this, and I would appreciate the board doesn't until we get a proposal. Let's not comment on something that we don't know about. We can all have our own personal opinions on it, but the finance committee does not have a stance on what happens at Middle School East until we see the proposal. And then after that, we can have 15 stances on what should happen to Middle School East. But until then, we do not
Evaluate
formally.
it from the financial aspect.
Exactly.
How
Until
it impacts the town.
until then, the finance committee does not have a position on what Middle School East's future is. And that's pretty much it.
Pay some taxes.
Anybody else?
One other thing, Chris, wonder if you could touch again on the fact that the official subcommittee assignments are on that one that is on the drive now. I think there's still some misunderstanding about changes.
Yep.
And maybe if you could, even you or Paul, maybe you could just send an email out to the membership with a copy of the darn thing,
I was supposed to print that out. Yep.
would you?
Can everyone please, I will send out an email tonight, please check your subcommittee assignments. I know I had talked about the shakeup, I know we had talked about, but obviously that was way back in December, before. Oh, actually, that's not true, it was in September's meeting. Everybody has a lot of different subcommittee assignments. Mike has brought that up to me, and I was supposed to print it out for this meeting, because he talked to me about it after the last meeting. I apologize, I did not. The subcommittee assignment is up on the drive. I will email that tonight as soon as I leave here. Please check it and see what subcommittees you're on. Because a lot of you have shifted and moved, because we had talked about, I'd like people getting a little bit more flavor, because I think people were sitting in subcommittees for a little too long, and I think it would be good for us to move a little bit. I know I liked moving subcommittees, and I like going to everybody else's subcommittee to see, what's going on in these departments. Unfortunately, if you've been on sewer for 20 years, you know sewer from top to bottom, every line of that budget,
That's a
but
tough
you may
one,
not
too.
know the highway department at all. So, you
Sewer's
know,
tough.
it's good to move around.
You know the sewer from the top to the bottom.
Yeah. I knew that there was a joke. I should have picked another department.
You give those straight lines, and we're on television, so we can't say much.
Does anybody else have anything else that I can put my foot in my mouth on? No?
Move we adjourn.
I got a motion by Aldo to adjourn.
Second.
Second by Chuck. All those in favor? Thanks for everybody coming on Valentine's Day. Go home, kiss your wives and husbands.